Intro video. Welcome everyone to Ladder Daily Digest and the Amazing Maven and Megan Connor.
Hi guys.
And so we had like 3 people waiting, and we have 14 on right now. So that's pretty good. Probably my brother, my daughter, and all of Megan's friends.
Megan's
So yeah,
friends.
so today I thought we'd talk about sort of the divine feminine. Rob's going to introduce the show, and we're in Tim's living room hanging out with Tim. And so he's going to talk about his
treats.
divine feminine experience.
I have brought
later.
Jammy Dodgers.
You have some Jammy Dodgers? Wow.
I have some Jammy Dodgers.
Man,
And a huge Toblerone bar.
There you go.
Nothing but the best.
So, okay, so
Aloha, Debbie. Good to see you.
aloha, Debbie.
Aloha, Debbie.
Rob's gonna introduce the show with some stats or something, maybe here.
Well, yes.
Nice.
Stand aside while I mansplain this women's issue, okay?
That's right.
I credit some of my ideas from things that I have read, things that I have heard, and to Britt Hartley in part. I want to discuss this trend or this shift that we're seeing in society and in places Mormon and Mormon adjacent, which is that women are reclaiming and expressing their spirituality. And I see them doing this by going out and getting it with different tools, different people, and in new places where they're getting their spiritual needs met, to include the need to connect with their self, others, and the divine, to express themselves and have a voice, to claim their spiritual powers, to find awe, transcendence, intimacy, and healing. And the methodologies for this spirituality that I'm aware of are numerous, but they tend to be more nature-based, obviously more feminine, more embodied, kind of maybe witchy, a little bit pagan, and more intuitive. And they include things, how many of these have you heard about in your communities? Reiki, energy healing, meditation, hiking and walking in nature, astrology, going to retreats that are outside of church, essential oils, yoga, tarot, energy readings, life coaches. That's a big one. I want to talk about more about that later. Psychics, embodied movement, sound baths, a lot of woo-woo stuff, maybe also to include psychedelics, ketamine therapy, things of this nature. But all of these things, if you'll note, they don't require patriarchy. And some of them, although not all, are actually backed up by science. And a lot of these insights that I got, like I said, came from Britt Hartley and others. And here's some facts. Gen Z, in particular, they dislike labels and they distrust large institutions. And they are inclined to identify as spiritual, but not religious. Women are rejecting the claim that that a man must stand between them and the divine. They don't want the intermediator anymore. Women are becoming accustomed to having their voices heard more in the workplace, in education, sports, and they're unsatisfied with being muzzled in church. COVID revealed that women emotionally missed church less than men did. Men actually really missed it, particularly with Gen Z, who are now attending at higher rates than women. It seems that the church is a public sphere where men can lead and mansplain and preach, where the home and outside of the home is where women tend to find more spiritual creativity. And in that context, they can lead spiritually. I also want to say that the internet is a big factor in this because it's allowing women to connect with new tribes outside of the ward boundaries or your visiting teaching assignments, right? The internet also makes access to new ideas and knowledge knowable. And finally, the consumer capitalistic culture in which we live is making it possible for practitioners of these healing arts to be compensated and make it worth women's time to get involved in this stuff. And I'll just end with 2 anecdotes before I turn it over to the rest of the panel. As I speak, my wife, Frances, is at a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat. And I'm really excited to see, what comes of it when she gets back. And secondly, the last anecdote, I have an LDS.
Say, so that's why you haven't heard from her in a while, because it's a silent retreat. Yet it's not able to contact you.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That she's going to come back and she will talk to me again. Yeah, I'm hoping. But the final anecdote, I have an LDS friend who's kind of prominent. I'm not going to mention her name, but she and other members are posting on social media their attendance at women's retreats outside of church. And the example I'm going to use is a program called Rooted and Rising through the Tree of Life. And these women get together to dance, discuss their spiritual gifts, divine guidance. And then my friend gets up and sings songs about Heavenly Mother. That's wonderful. And it's certainly a shift or a change in the way things used to be. So I really want to invite others on the panel, particularly the women, to comment on what are you observing in your own communities and how are you personally finding your spiritual center?
So I'd like to introduce everybody to Heidi Love down there.
Hi.
Hi, Heidi.
She's a podcaster, and she also speaks to the planet Xenu across the galaxy.
Yes.
Amen. Amen.
I do it for my spirituality. Don't worry.
That's right.
Okay. Is that next to Kolob? Okay, right.
Xenu is next to Kolob. It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes.
And hi, Maven. Maven has her own podcast and she's on Latter Daily Digest occasionally.
Thank you.
Maven's a hero. Your intellectual, 12-year-old self was such a great listen. I loved that.
So,
Wait.
Maven, what's your time
Oh,
like?
yeah, from my journal.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I was it's embarrassing for a lot of things. I was 16, and then I need to find. There's worse entries than what I read, where I really saw this guy that my friend likes. It is absolutely 100% the devil's doing and getting her off the path of rightiousness. So
Man,
it's worse than what I read. So
What's
You
your
were
time-
get thee hence Satan. Just kidding.
Maven, how long are you here for?
not long. So I was wondering if actually I could share a story and
Yeah,
then
so we'll let Maven
I'll
go
have to
first
run.
because she takes priority in everybody's life.
We love Maven.
So I don't even know where you guys were started going, but yeah. So the subject being the divine feminine, I never I know there was part of me as a member that liked the Heavenly Mother idea, but there was just nothing to her, honestly, and she's not really there. So I never really quite connected with her the way that some other women do in the church, and I do love that for them, where that does connect for people. So even though Mormonism technically has a divine feminine, it's really kind of a big nothing. And even kind of how they want us to be as women, it's kind of nothing, at least as far as I feel like a lot of the teachings that I was preparing to do this, and then I've seen other women do it, where anything that's you that comes into conflict with marriage or family is something that needs to be discarded, is something selfish or undermining. I think there was a talk where I think it was Packer, but he mentioned the so-called needs of women, and yeah, that's a quote. That's a real, yeah. And so it's just, just kind of this thing, and then this whole service thing. And then if you're not happy as a mom, then there's two reasons. First is it's your fault. Are you doing XYZ enough? Are you, full of gratitude or whatever? Are you being selfish and not just losing yourself in your family and service? And then the second person whose fault it could be was the feminists. You know, if our women are unhappy, it's because the feminists told them that they're unhappy being moms, you know. Even though like most of us here in this space, we've rejected that, but somehow they're still like making us unhappy with our life choices. Anyway, so something that changed for me happened as after I left the church. I was already an atheist, so that I think that's kind of makes things interesting. I don't believe in gods, and yet that's how I found it. And it was a trip to the UK. I went to the British Museum, and they had an exhibit about femininity and the divine feminine, really, and just cultures through ages, the different kinds of types and kinds of goddesses there are. And I was familiar with many of them, but as I'm going around and I'm looking at little statue figurines and like gold filigree art or paintings and just all of these things. One of the things that just really struck me was just the wide array of the depth and personality that other women goddesses had in other cultures. And I realized that like our divine feminine is really just nothing. It's just submissive, and it's just like, again, exists but not there in any other way. And there is a beauty, I think, to femininity can be submission, it can be giving and service and family and all of those things. But I just felt like they really boxed us into something like really, really tiny in the church. And so when I'm looking at these goddesses, and they also, like, some of them had kind of normal humanish characteristics. Some were really jealous, others are intellectual, others are sexual, there's just, it's just everywhere. And almost none of them are one dimensional. One example was Shiva, and this was actually really common. A lot of times was a goddess could have like a fertility motif, this creative one, which is obvious and very understandable. But then also like the destructive one, this fiery nature, this or sometimes war even. So there'd be this duality there, and that made the whole being. And so I felt like there's a lot of power that I'm finding now in anger and in like being firm and just all of these things that were not what I was allowed to be. And it just felt so empowering, because I just felt like that's femininity too. That is mine, that is just part of the whole thing, and all of it is my power. It's the angry mama bear energy is our power, and then also the soft, the cuddle, like the hold the baby, that's ours. And then I just wanted to like share one more thing. I think the one goddess that I connect to the most now is a Greek goddess, and it's Artemis. And she's got an interesting kind of duality too, because Artemis is she was like fanatically against marriage. Now, I'm not against marriage, but I am for myself. So I I understand that for her, like that she did not have that desire, right? And she was also like fiercely protective of her autonomy. So there are a couple stories where she was a hunter, so there were other like male hunters either trying to force themselves on her or peeking at her when she's bathing, that she would either shoot with her bow and arrow, or one of them she turned into a stag and he was torn apart by his own dogs. So there's this bodily autonomy, and also this kind of justice that sometimes women don't get when we are violated by men. So I like that aspect of her, that she's just a real feminist icon that way. And then she's also like because pairing up was not part of her, sexuality is not part of her motif, or maybe it is, but it's more of a lack of it. You know what I mean? That is part of it, but she's still a fertility goddess, despite being a virginal goddess and an unpaired one, and not having given birth, because I know some goddesses give birth like it other than sexual ways, just depending on what the folklore might be. But Artemis's story is that her mother didn't have anywhere to give birth, and until an island was, oh, I'm messing it up. There was somebody that took pity on her and gave her a place to give birth, and it was twins. So Artemis was the first one. She's the firstborn, and she immediately, as soon as she's born, she becomes midwife or doula for her mother and helps deliver her own brother Apollo. And so that's why she's got, she's also got this fertility motif, and she's seen as someone to assist in birth. And I just really liked that too, because for one, I feel like even without having children myself or giving birth, I do still feel that creative aspect. I don't feel like that's something I've rejected or not me, just because that's not been my specific experience. And I do care very much about other women, having rights to birth, but also being safe for it. I want women to have the care that they need. Women that do want to be moms, I want them to be taken very well care of, and so so that's just something that I feel that I don't know. I just really like the idea that there can be kind of these conflicting parts of us, and really just a whole person. Anyway,
Isn't Artemis represented by the owl as well?
Mhm. Yeah.
Isn't she represented by the owl?
The
in her
owl, and
mythology?
also a stag, and then also the moon, because I think like she gets kind of the nighttime motif, and then Apollo gets,
Yeah, and I feel like women get the most beautiful part of symbology, which is the night.
yeah,
Which is so interesting that men are identified with the sun, which we see the Son of God, and women are identified with that nighttime aura, the moon, that same kind of duality, the yin and the yang.
yeah,
And you see that in all throughout like mythology and history. And women have always had that kind of, like you said, in ancient religions, this woman figure who is a deity or a goddess who represents the opposite of man, which man can be weak or war or
Mhm.
greed or lust, and women always represent like that soft, powerful, like I think even more like can be more destructive, like as
Yeah.
a Debbie, like the god of arms, like so
yeah,
I love the conversation of female divinity, and that's a really beautiful like way to interpret yourself too.
And also one thing that I wanted to bring into this is like what you are doing, Maven, that centers you, that excites you, like meditation or going for a walk or looking at flowers or something. And in preparatory to that, I just wanted to say my mom lived in Arizona and she loved to garden, even though it was Arizona. And it was basically, she moved around rocks all the time. Like, oh, look how pretty my rock garden is. Yeah, it looks like a bunch of rocks. But she loved doing it, right? And my wife
Yeah.
currently paints as a
oh
way
yeah,
of getting her divine femininity and the thing that centers her and makes her have worth. So Maven, what do you do that gives
that's a
you?
good question. I think I mean, honestly, right now, I think the stuff that I do with reproductive rights is, I think, me really trying to tune into that, and especially because I am trying to really focus on the aspect of motherhood and children. But like I mean, like without it just expands. Women's healthcare is really not great in the United States. Even before the Dobbs decision, like we had a really like high maternal fatality rate that just we shouldn't have, and I think it's just because we're not listened to enough. And I have so many friends that have had issues like with their reproductive systems where debilitating pain or just some kind of dysfunction. My my good friend growing up, when she finally like started her period, it was almost, she bled almost more days than she didn't. And even as an adult, it affected her ability to work and to go to school a lot, because it would just take so much from her. And as much as like she really wanted to be a mother, she just was never able to. And so at one point, you know, she was really trying to get a hysterectomy just so that she could just like move on and live her life and and be able to work and consistently and all this stuff. And she could not get one despite a lifetime, like from 11 years old of issues, until she just got to the point where she told her doctor, like, look, I'm either like, you're gonna have to take it out. Either you do it and we schedule it and it's safe, or you finish it, because I'm gonna start cutting this out of my body. And he got some kind of like a mental health exception kind of pushed through insurance so that she could have that, you know. And then also just culturally, like especially for a culture that supposedly loves mothers, I really dislike the I guess like breastfeeding phobia that it kind of exists. And this is something my sister-in-law internalized. So when she had given birth to my niece, and I lived in the same house as them, I had, you know, my section and then she had hers, and it just she would say, when, you know, when it was time to feed, she would say, I'm sorry, I need to, you know, feed my baby. I'll go in the room, you know, while everyone else is here, or I don't want to make you uncomfortable. It was always like all of this apologetic language. And so I kept telling her over and over, like, this is your house, you know. So if you should not have to go into another room unless you want to, if that's what you want, because you want some quiet and privacy. But, you know, if you want to be in the living room, I was just like, it's your house, you know, and so you can tell me to leave. You can tell me to leave anytime. And I just did that every time she asked. And over time, she started to kind of just like take that on herself. And then towards the end, she would just tell people, you know, it usually family. She's not breastfeeding like with the, you know, strangers or guests over, but with family members, she would just be like, I'm gonna feed my baby now. And you know,
I
like,
also feel like that's such a modesty thing. Like, it was really weird. Like, I had no problem breastfeeding my children in front of my husband, or like even in front of my best girlfriend, like, because it's normal. But like to whip my boob out in front of my father-in-law, I was kind of like, this is weird. Like, there is an exposure to your body.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify. I don't think she ever did that in front of any men other than, of course, my brother, her husband. But
I don't know if that's just Mormonism in me, or just like maybe like my own sense of like autonomy. Like, I don't just do that in front of other people. Like right now on this podcast, I wouldn't just do that, you know? Like, so it's weird to say, because I have this baby, I'm going to like, hey, get it now, see my tits, okay?
You
You're
know
lucky.
what I mean? I think that's what got me. And it just, and it wasn't like I don't want to, but it just seemed like she was really uncomfortable with her body, like I said, and then uncomfortable, you know, doing again, like in her house, you know, and so that's why I was just like,
and for sure there is like, well, we could go on that topic forever, but then anyway, there is something with that.
That's
like
my femininity. I do like creating things. I'm not often as creative, but I do like that too when I attempt to garden things. And that's what I used to always think, that I wasn't artistic at all, like in any way, or not very creative. And I don't know, there's actually a lot of ways that you can be creative. And often when I had to, or I was forced to, I was often quite pleased with what I was ending up able to do. So but anyway, and the creation, again, I think that is very female. And even in the goddesses, the creation aspect wasn't necessarily always giving birth. Sometimes it was land and gardening, and you know, so that's food production, this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of ways.
Well, and look at the power of women with their ability to create life and then nurture it. Let's just go into that, because a man does not have that ability. And I'm sorry, we're different, boys. Okay, we're cool. You're not cool. No, I was kidding. I mean, I always felt like it's a very powerful gift to be able to create life, because that was the most like jaw-dropping moment in my development and maturity and evolution, was becoming a mother. Like, literally life altering. Like, all of a sudden you're like, what the heck? I've been invaded. That thing takes over your brain. Like, I don't care what age your kids are, from the moment they're conceived until the moment they're gone. And even after that, you will constantly think about them. And I think that's the power of religion, is because we do want to understand, if, especially with like bad medicine, like what happens to a woman who loses multiple children? What does that do to her psychology? There has to be something there as a safeguard as far as religion to say, oh, families can be together forever, or oh, there is an eternal plan, or oh, there is a heaven, or oh, there is a God who loves children. So in a way, it's like a mental like placebo to make you feel okay, because that ability to lose and create life is, I know it affects men, but on a female level, it's definitely something that affects females different than men.
Yeah.
And I think any woman who's ever like wanted to get pregnant, couldn't get pregnant, accidentally got pregnant and went, oh shit. Like there's so many emotions that run into that world or that experience.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I think that's a beautiful mission,
with you.
to
And
support
that was another thing too that I felt
female.
kind of about the church, is that it really tries to control every aspect of that decision that we're making but just by pushing women, like, first of all, like, to marry young, marry quick. Ideally, you shouldn't be on birth control.
Let the babies come. Let the babies
Right,
come.
exactly. And even if you're not ready. And so I a friend of mine, kind of, she expressed feeling that she had more children than she probably would have chosen, and also like way too young and way too close together, and she was just exhausted all the time. She said she expressed that she felt that she was, robbed of some of the inherent joy of motherhood that she would have been able to have on her own timetable and with her own choice. And so that was something I was remembering and thinking too, was just like, boy, even when it comes to the choices about birth, like, it's the men in the church that are telling us when and how many, and it's not theirs. It's not
Well,
theirs.
what is interesting is I think they've lost kind of the power, because that was definitely like modus operandi in any of our demographic. Growing up was within the church. You let those baby come, and any baby you got was just another spirit added, and there wasn't like a safeguard.
Yeah.
And also, like, there was a lot of shame. But I think the church, like, now women, and you can even see it in the birth records or the statistics in Utah. Now the average family is maybe 3 children per young married couple, versus in my generation, it was like 6 to 8, bigger families.
I had 14 children.
Oh.
So
yeah. Okay, boys, what do you guys think? Or ladies, anyone else have
a comment? Yeah.
Let's let Heidi. Is it Heidi's turn?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'll speak on this. I actually think it's hysterical that the church holds women down when the last most sought after blessing, the second anointing, is sealed by a woman at the end.
Right? Your feet have to get washed by her.
Well,
I'm gonna need to run. So was there
marital bedroom? Yeah. So
was there? I just wanted to know, was there a question for me? I think, did you have a comment about something that I had said? It seemed like.
Oh no, sorry. I thought they were just telling me to go.
Yeah,
sorry.
Maven can bounce, and Heidi has the floor.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Maven.
Thank you,
Maven.
Maven.
Take care.
So, for those that don't know, after the whole deed is over, right, you go home to your marital bedroom, and there you receive the blessing from your wife, which I've always found a little hysterical, because I'm like, wait a minute, the last blessing in the whole game, like, you get to the end of the game and the girl does it? What's happening? Right? Like, what is happening here? So I think that this is actually, and I'm a conspiracy theorist, you guys. So I think they're channeling divine feminine regardless the whole time, keeping us pregnant and wanting us to have all of this to go towards the patriarchy to lift them up, because, that helps. So that's just my opinion on the church part of Mother in Heaven, and it's Asherah anyway. Like I am definitely of the belief that they are doing Solomonic magic, and the 1% that know that, and that's just how it is. They want to call it folk magic or whatever they want to call it, but it's magic regardless. So
You're so
um
right.
yeah. So I think that, they keep that on the DL, because if women actually harnessed their own energy, well, wouldn't we have some fun? I mean, then they started burning people alive. So that's what happened the last time that started getting, in with things, is they just started setting witches on fire, and that didn't go good. So I think that they had to organize things. I think Brigham was very smart at organizing and keeping things in a specific way, to keep things exactly how he wanted it. And that
Like
doesn't
any
mean
good mob boss.
yeah, exactly. Because we ran away as Mormons, and we ran for our lives, only to call up the government and go, "Hey, can we help you build the railroad? Because that sounds like a good idea. Do you need our help with that?" Because, I don't know. I'm just a crazy lady. But
That's funny. Oh my
as
gosh.
for me, I think it was the plan. Yeah.
And Heidi,
I
you're
mean,
going to be here for an hour
yeah,
or
yeah.
so.
I'll be
So
here
we'll
for
have
however
you
long.
back in. I'm not going to kick you out or anything, but we'll have you we'll give you the floor again to talk about your show, and also if
Yeah, of
you're
course.
doing any energy work or anything like that, you know what I mean, or whatever you're doing to do that. And then Megan, let's hear from you.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Megan.
Hi. Good to meet you. I think it's interesting, the conversation that when Maven was talking and about the public breastfeeding issue. The only reason that any women are ever ashamed to breastfeed in public is because, especially within the church, that men made us feel as though our bodies were pornography, and that's literally a quote. It's been said in general conference before, that if you are not modest, your body is pornography for a man. And imagine how that makes women feel, because pornography is equated with sickness, it's equated with addiction, it's equated with unhealthy boundaries, it's equated with just unhealthy personhood in general. And so for the men to tell the women that their bodies are addictive, sick, unhealthy, it makes us feel terrible about our bodies. And not only that, but it makes us feel as though we can never be good enough, no matter what our body looks like. So we are held to this certain ideal that it has to look a certain way. But if it looks that certain way that's attractive and appealing, then it's disgusting and it's addictive and it's sick. But if it doesn't look that way, then you're not good enough. And it's up to you to make yourself look in a way that's going to be attractive to your spouse. So I think there's so much wrapped up in all of this about purity culture and body shame, and just the general inherent messages that we get not only from the church but also from society, that are designed, I think, to keep us small and to keep us from fully embracing how powerful we actually are as women. And to not say necessarily, and this may be an unpopular opinion in this discussion, but not to say that we are more powerful than men, but that our power exists in different ways. We have different strengths and we have weaknesses. And I know that's like not a popular thing to say in feminism, but women have weaknesses and men have weaknesses, right? And we're meant to complement each other. And not to say that a woman can't be whole without a man, because I think that's part of the whole discussion. And that to me is what I started to focus and perseverate on when Jean first invited me to this conversation, is the fact that I, in Mormonism, did not have direct access to God. I had to go through a man to do that. So in the Mormon temple, a man makes promises directly with God. A woman makes a promise to listen to her husband. And I know that has been taken out of the temple ceremony now. But the idea that, God doesn't change, things are eternal, whatever, it's so infuriating that the temple ceremony has changed so many times, because if it's something that is integral to our ability to reach the highest level of Mormon heaven, then why is it that it's changed so many times? Why is it different for my mother than it is for me? Why is it different for my grandmother than it was for my mother? Why is it that I had to bow my head and say yes, but my daughters didn't have to? And so it's just so confusing. As a woman in Mormonism, you don't really understand your identity because it constantly changes. And we're being sent so many mixed messages about who we are and who we're allowed to be, that for women who grow up in this culture, it becomes an identity crisis. So then when we leave and we finally have the freedom to make these choices for ourselves and to decide for ourselves what is divine within me and how do I get to connect with the divine and how do I get to be divine in my own right, those conversations are really important for us to have. Those of us who have asked those questions and reached some answers about what we think is right for ourselves in those ways, I think it's so important for us to share that with people who are still figuring it out and struggling, because so many of us yet don't feel as though we have the permission to fully embrace who we are as divine and who we are as feminine and still be acceptable within society, within our culture, within our family systems, and to ourselves as well.
I wonder, do you think that's a generational thing? Because I don't feel like these 20-year-olds have that kind of baggage. And I'm like, I'm so jelly of you guys, because like those Mormon housewives literally are throwing all kinds of stuff against the norm. And the church is like, well, this isn't like a version of what we are. But I'm like, but this is a version of like a normal 20-year-old woman in this kind of like demographic, like. And I feel like it's kind of like the Barbie monologue where there's a beautiful monologue where she goes like, we're not good enough, or we're too strong, or we're not strong. Right. And there's like that whole thing of what is like the perfect woman. And I feel like that movie, like culturally, was like sensational.
Yeah,
because I
That's right. We're going to show the Barbie movie after we're done talking. No.
The Barbie movie and Airplane, apparently.
If you're willing to look at it, with an open mind as a marginalized, objectively, as a marginalized group of people trying to find a voice and find a way to reclaim their humanity in a system that is designed to marginalize them. If you can look at it from that perspective, it's really, really powerful. And I think the reason why these 20-year-olds don't have the same crises that we do as women in later years is because we're having these conversations. It's because women who've gone before us have done the work to create a situation or create a community where we can have the conversation. I think about people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who were the first ones who started advocating for women to vote. If they hadn't raised those conversations and those topics, we might still not have the vote today. There are actually women in society and culture right now who are saying that women should not be allowed to vote. This is mind-blowing to me. And the fact that I, as a woman in this day and age, had to learn about feminism by looking it up rather than by having a conversation with my own mother about it is so incredibly telling.
So let's see,
it's
Tim?
definitely different times.
Tim or Dave, do you want to weigh in on anything?
Yeah.
Let's start with Dave.
Dave, because you're the young guy. You date all these young girls. What do you think about it?
Why would I date? No, I've been so I haven't dated since my son was born almost 14 years ago. Like, no.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, Dave is older than we think. Don't let him fool you. He looks like a young buck.
He's so hip.
I'm 35. Yes. Yeah. So
yeah. We all pretend he's 25.
I'm a little bit caught off guard just because of some drama outside of this. But anyway, it's interesting to hear these different stories because a lot of this wasn't explained to me. Like I remember chatting with some members actually last night in Discord about why the Heavenly Mother isn't really addressed. Like, why isn't it discussed? Because in other religions like Hinduism, which I'm more, familiar with, there are goddesses, and there's Shaktism. Shaktas are people that believe that Brahman, God is actually female, right? And there's monotheistic versions and polytheistic versions of it. So why is it that if the church is true, the Heavenly Mother isn't really referenced? Like, I can get wanting to be reverent around that, sure, but why isn't she addressed at all? When other religions that are not true have like really rich lore and mythology and histories and even anthologies of lineage of these different goddesses.
Amen.
What's the difference?
Amen. Good point.
And what it was explained to me, and this doesn't even make sense to me, maybe you guys can help me out here, but what was explained to me was, because the focus is on Jesus Christ, the Heavenly Mothers could be considered a distraction, and the goal is to focus on Christ because Christ is the one that saves, not Heavenly Mother, which to me doesn't make sense because, again, I mean, okay, Hanumanji, the monkey god, sure, he's the loyal companion, he can save you. You can still pray to Pavarti, you can still pray to Lakshmi and to Durga and Mahakali, right? There's nothing stopping you from that. So I don't know if this is a cultural thing. I don't know if this is just a difference in theology. I don't know, but to me, there's just a disconnect. I can't connect in my brain.
Well, I think that's a Christianity thing, because any Christian religion has that kind of like path. So Mormonism is based on Christianity, so it followed that path. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because other older religions, and even religions that don't exist, that existed back in the day, definitely had women as like a theological god. There were definitely women worshipped in that respect, as far as having as much power as a man. And I really feel like maybe that's the Christian thing that kind of, well, Muslims do it, Jews do it. I don't know. Can't just put it on Christianity, though. I don't
just
know.
an Abrahamic faith thing, maybe.
Abrahamic religion.
Tim, what do you think? You're the expert. When did it all change, Mr. Man?
When did what change? When?
Just like, were we once a society or a culture that worshipped two gods, a male and a female god, or a version of that, and then became something else? Because it feels like history definitely, I mean, if we go back, those cultures worshipped both. And now most mainstream religions today only worship a male protagonist or a deity. Right? Does that sound, am I off the mark? I mean, I'm a woman. I could be wrong.
Well, just to chime in with my limited view, and I honestly, I don't know enough about this topic to be any kind of an authority on it. But the way that I look at it is that a religion that was created by Joseph Smith, who's a man, right? Mormonism was designed for an 1830s white male cisgendered person. Like that's what Mormonism was designed to suit. Yeah. And I don't think that in Joseph Smith's mind, in his limited view of 1830s New York, did he even know about Hinduism? Did he even know about other religions that were out there? I think that he mostly knew about Protestantism, and Mormonism was his version of that. It was like, he sort of made it. It's interesting to look back at the history, and if you read Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History, and you look back at the evolution of the ideas that he was forming, almost all of his early ideas were meant to solve a problem that was happening in his own family, or discussions that were happening around his own kitchen table. His mom's loss of her son and things like that formed his
This
very
is what
early
happens
theology.
when a guy makes up a religion, and he might have family issues. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, I mean, if you look at the long history of religion in general, it is mostly men trying to make sense of the world and the supernatural and things they can't explain.
Kind
Very
of like
few. Go ahead.
kind of like when you write a proclamation about the family, but you don't include the women in the writing process.
Right. Exactly. And I think this is the fundamental problem with Mormon theology is that even now, the highest ranking woman in the Mormon church is outclassed, outranked, outpowered by her 12-year-old grandson. She can't even make policies for the organization that she is in charge of without passing it through a man. All of the policies in the doctrine that we have that govern women, women's bodies, women's voices, women's power, were all made by men. And even if the women had input, they are in such a brainwashed culture that they can't even present ideas that disagree with anything that the men are saying because they still have to run it by the men. So if I'm the general Young Women's president, or if I'm the general Relief Society president, or I'm the general primary president, those are the three highest ranking women in the church. And I have an idea about how to radically empower women, for example, and I want to talk about Heavenly Mother, and I want to institute some more hymns, because we do have at least one or two hymns that talk about Heavenly Mother. I want to do more songs and more scriptures that talk about Heavenly Mother. It has to be approved by a man.
I think this blame lies less with Joseph and more with Brigham for a few reasons, because there is multiple instance of this with Joseph empowering not only his mother and Emma to make multiple decisions, but also there was Zena Huntington Young, who is actually noted to have given more priesthood blessings and more healings than any other man. So I don't think this lies with Joseph. His mother also wrote in the letter that she has a little excerpt of that caused the chaos of the world in Quinn's book about drawing, magic circles and writing the faculty of a brack. Well, she wouldn't know those things unless she was in on Masonry somehow. And I do think they were more of a Martinist community where Masonry was co-shared with the women at that point. And so I think this blame really lies more in the fact that Brigham came with an iron fist and shot this down.
I will say that because
I 100% agree with you.
Joseph was an occultist. Let's first and foremost put that down. He definitely played with the occult, and his Lucy, I'm sorry, was the leader of the tribe. If you want to talk about a coven or a family that was raised with like a different type of belief system, it was not Christian. And those different type of beliefs definitely put power with women.
Yes.
100%.
Well, they make them as lay people, and then she's calling for doctors from Harvard to come and save his leg. Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work out somehow in my book. But like also from Joseph Sr.'s side, we don't have exactly Christian background, because I'm telling you, his grandpa's name was Azazel, like Azazel. Like, I'm sorry, like that's not a Christian name. Hi, Joe.
Let's just say in general that when Brigham Young became president of the Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he created a bastardized version of Mormonism. That was not what Joseph intended. He stopped ordaining Black women. He disbanded the Relief Society. He started sending people out to marry Native Americans to turn their skin more white. Like, let's face it, the Brighamite sect is just a bastardized version of what Joseph intended. And it is not a healthy, a good, a favorable, any kind of anything that we should have ever entertained.
I think once Joseph died, and let's just be honest, every religion forming from that original vine has become a bastardized version of it. And that's why we have so many fundamentalists in Utah. We have 18 known groups. Like the Kingstons right now believe in incest and inbreeding because they believe they're from the pure line of Christ. And you have to only be related to a Kingston to get to heaven and be a numbered man. They're almost like their own Jehovah Witness weird version of this. And I think the problem is, and I've said this, is when something what started out as a lie can never be true, and it just creates more liars. So we can debate like anything in history, and back it up with facts. Joseph's stuff was like total myth making, weird, occultish, like putting your head in a hat and looking at a rock. Right now, I could tell you what you want me like. I'm amazed that this religion got so big. And in fact, if you wanted to talk about conspiracy theories, I would say that the religion is like a CIA op.
Oh,
like
no, it
allowed
is.
to become so big and so powerful because what are they funding? What are they controlling? What is this religion doing? Because I think back in the day it might have done good, but
I don't think any of it's good, for sure. And if you only have to look at how Las Vegas was taken over by the Mormon Mafia to figure out what exactly happened with the CIA, including going into Watergate. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Well, and I lived in Vegas, and it was established by Mormons. So
Yes.
yeah.
No,
Oh my gosh, you got the tinfoil hat. Okay, talk to us. Talk to us.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a
The
conspiracy
tinfoil hat
theory
has
for
come
you.
out.
I've got a conspiracy theory for you if you want to hear it.
There we go.
Oh,
So-
I know Heidi
Let's
does.
go.
Expo Joe's got the tinfoil hat on. So when I was investigating the church and when I got baptized into the church, the concept of the Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father made sense because Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati. And it wasn't really explained to me then why the Heavenly Mother wasn't talked about at all. So my conspiracy theory is that the Heavenly Mother is in fact Goddess Parvati, and she has not revealed herself yet because if she were to now, with the way humanity is, she would incarnate as Goddess Durga or Mahakali and the world would burn.
Well, they did
You know,
say
here's
that
the
was going to
thing.
happen for all the non-tide payers.
You know, my favorite conspiracy or argument, like next to did Adam and Eve have belly buttons, was Jesus really a woman? And they changed the mythology of it that it was a woman. And like they crucified a woman, but then like the Bible came out and made her a man.
Did you hear the one about how Jesus, the conspiracy theory, Jesus was a Roman psyop because wherever Jesus was, number one, there were always Roman soldiers and Roman military bases nearby. Number two, he always taught to pay taxes to Caesar as well as to love your enemy. And number three, he went around healing Roman soldiers. And the timing, according to the man who made it up, like came up with it, called Joseph Atwill, said that the timing of his location didn't match. And so in his theory, in his hypothesis, Jesus could have been multiple people under the pay of the Roman Empire, basically pacifying the Jewish people so the Romans wouldn't actually have to engage them in a military combat.
Well, and they were waiting for the Messiah, so he did definitely, if that's true, use their religion and their dogma against them and saying, here's your Messiah. You've been waiting for him for so long. We've got him. And he's really a Roman op. Oh, that's funny. That would be a great series on TV. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, like inside the church right now, there's like this Heavenly Mother revolution happening that instead of being progressive, frankly, it can be quite toxic if you look at some of the things that are being talked about right now. It's surprising because, like, okay, Christianity, not noted, at least the Roman churches, church and its sect, not noted for its feminism, sure, but at the same time, you know, whether you got, you know, you have two mothers of Jesus in the traditional Christianity. You've got Sophia on the one side, which is where all of this, you know, Heavenly Mother stuff that's coming back to light really revolves around. And then you have Mary, and so you have these two different versions of the idealization of femininity around Jesus. But at the end of the day, pretty core to Christianity, I would argue, is God's non-gender. And so that's what I think is interesting is that by the fact that Mormonism, for example, brings in God's being a person with a apparatus. Yeah, right, exactly. You got it, Rob. All of a sudden now we have to have a conversation about deities and their genitals, and I don't think that it's in Christianity traditionally that's not a conversation that happens inside of that. So I think it's so I think that it's interesting that it's like, okay, as soon as we start as soon as we start gendering gods, some of this toxic stuff starts to come to light.
It goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, like Lilith, the first wife, who was not good enough, or Eve, who became the epitome of every human's downfall. I mean, I guess you're right. Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful about my Lilith. I do serve the devil here at Hellfire Agency. And so, in spite of what Heidi tells her followers, that I'm not serious about it.
And your mom.
I'm an atheist. And my mom. But I think it's interesting to look at it from like Heidi and I have had this conversation on our myriad podcast episodes before. It's like, she left Mormonism and became a Christian, believes in the Christian God in that way. And it's like, here I am, this cold-hearted atheist, ex-Mormon, and here's this Christian ex-Mormon, and
he didn't want to be my friend.
Yeah, well,
that's funny.
It was hairy at the beginning. Oh, guess what? I'm going to be bouncing back and forth here because I'm talking to Jacob Hansen from A Thoughtful Faith on Facebook right now.
You are not.
Oh, I am.
Oh,
he's agreed to be on the show.
Oh my gosh!
Really?
That sounds fun. Hey, tell Jacob I say hi, will you? Tell Jacob.
Do we need to watch you and support you talk to Jacob Hansen? Because that is
would you be mad? Would you be mad if there's 7 of you and then there's Jacob Hansen? Can I be on Jacob Hansen's side so he's not completely outnumbered? Because I actually get along with him. I like Jacob. He's cool with me.
I think that Jacob's willing to go into the lion's den with me alone.
Oh,
he hasn't seen me in action like Heidi has. Yes, I doubt he has seen me take down Jacob Isbell with pretty on Heidi's program.
Well, the last time I saw Jacob Hansen, he was on the mat getting his butt spanked by Isbell. So just saying, I was there.
I don't.
Sorry, Jacob.
So far, I'm content to believe that he thinks he's safe with me, and we're going to keep it at that level.
Are you going to wear the hat when you talk to him, or just in the middle of it? Are you going to whip it out again?
And just be like, "What hat?"
I think you prepared the hat prior. This was a Jacob Hansen
Oh, this is funny.
It was in the ether. My dark lord my dark lord gave me the revelation, said, "Thou shalt make unto thee a hat." And I said, "I'm doing it." No. So I recorded my first episode today, by the way, with a woman. I think this is appropriate to the end here. A woman named Jenny. She runs a podcast called Life Take Two. I'm sure you've all seen it. And we had a great conversation today about how in the church that I am starting for atheists, yes, it's happening, is I said, one thing I said, I thought of you when I came up with this idea. We mark all these rites of passage in life in God religions. And so you need an atheist religion for this one, which is divorce. When you leave a bad marriage, a toxic marriage, it is an awakening. It's a rite of passage. You need to be able to move on and rediscover yourself and stuff. And I'm like, if there was a ritual for divorcing your spouse, what would it look like? I had my ideas, but I've never been divorced. So I asked her, and she said she cried when I told her that. She's like, "Please let me come on the show and talk about it." And I learned so much about the perspective of women inside the church and leaving the church and atheists, because Jenny's an atheist now. And and how how important ceremony is, even to atheists who, we're cold-hearted, these things shouldn't matter to us. But there is an emotional wellness aspect to, having something that you do to not only break the marriage, not only break these vows, but to allow your true self to emerge. And it was a beautiful experience. I just had the most amazing experience. So
She's
yeah.
supposed to burn her wedding dress. That's what they do.
Oh, you know what she told me she did? I'll give you a sneak peek. She
Sounds
told me,
like a
she's
beautiful story.
she said, I took my wedding ring up to Camelback Mountain. She's like, I had just gotten a new diamond put into it, a bigger diamond into it. Cause she was like a trad wife, like maximum extreme, like, and she's like
married to the gays like that.
Yeah, like basically, yeah. But she's like, I took it up to the top of Camelback Mountain there in Phoenix, Arizona. She's like, and I threw it. I just threw it as hard as I could. She's like, sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't have, because she's like, I didn't realize how badly I would need money after that. And I could have pawned it and everything. Right. She's like, but the satisfaction, she's like, I went live on Facebook and I just streamed it to the whole world. And I'm like, watch me throw this man's covenants away.
Let's all go hike Camelback Mountain now and look for the freaking ring. Okay.
Bring your metal detectors.
Let's go. I'm already calculating. I know that's a 20K ring. Okay.
It's not small.
Something
that I did. Here's the one thing I want to say about all of this between men and women, because we're a group of men and women.
Okay, that's the end of our show.
I know. Whoa. How religion has come between our relationships, defined them, made them, executed how we believe in them, and even influenced them. Whereas if in a normal world where we were just allowed to, hey, I met a boy, I fell in love, and we decided to have kids or not have kids or whatever we decided to do without the influence of religion, would American marriages and families be healthier without religion? Because everyone likes to argue that the biggest downfall of family and marriage is the fact that we have lost our religion, when I would really argue is the fact that people went into those kind of relationships allowing those influences into their perspective or choice or thoughts, and if they were free to just maybe think for themselves, would they have made those same choices? I mean, that's.
I wonder if it's a cultural thing, because I'm familiar with what you're talking about, love marriage, as well as how arranged marriage works in India and Southeast Asia, and the divorce rate for arranged marriage is less than 1%, and the reason for that is because you have what are called biodatas, right? So think of like a mutual profile or a dating profile, but it goes way in depth. It goes into your father's family line, how much money you make, how much money your parents make, what your religion is, what your political views are. So when genetics. You meet and genetics, yep. So when you go and you meet the person, you're already a match on paper. You just need to see if you click. And the intent behind it is, in America, people fall in love and then get married, and then many, not all, because there are really bad marriages that should never have happened, like my parents, but there are cases where people are like, I don't love each other, it's not fair to stay together for the kids, we need to have our own lives, so they get divorced. Whereas the opposite mentality is in other cultures where people marry, and then because marriage is seen as the merging of two families, they learn to love each other through the process. That is why the divorce rate is so low.
Well, it's also because the whole family's at stake, not just one person and their family. Now you've got like, talk about pressure.
Well, yeah, and that's
there's a cultural influence versus a religious influence.
Exactly.
And I feel like
exactly. There's also religion in it. And too, like with family, like there's not a real big, at least in my opinion, there's not a big support structure in America when it comes to family. Whereas you have in other cultures where, you know, extended family live under the same roof, right? So if like
Yeah.
you have an argument with your partner, it's you and your partner. But elsewhere, it's you have your parents, you have their parents, you have extended family that you can use to as a resource to navigate life situations that doesn't exist in the US. So
Yeah,
it could be
and
just a cultural dynamic and maybe a religious, I don't know, but it's just interesting that you brought that up.
yeah, I agree with you. And I think that culturally we have these marriage ceremonies and these wedding receptions, right, where we invite our family and friends. And I'm not talking about Mormon temple weddings because they're completely different, but we invite our family and friends to come and witness our union. And the reason for inviting them is so that everybody who's there is supposed to support the union, is supposed to support the marriage, is supposed to back you up, is supposed to be there for comfort and for understanding when things aren't going well. They're supposed to be a champion for the union. And culturally, that's something that we don't do as Mormons. And I think we've lost sight of it as Americans in general as well, where we invite the community to come around us and to say, by being here and witnessing these vows, you are too promising that you are going to support this union between these two people and that you're going to advocate for it and that you're going to be here for them. And it's a sense of community that we just don't really talk about or do anymore. And it's this idea that the health of a union, of the health of such a union, is the health of the community. It's the health of and the well-being and the prosperity of the coming generations. And we just have lost sight of that.
Mhm.
Because
And
grandma's
now the
out.
church,
Grandma's
and
in
now
Acapulco.
the church has destroyed community and society by getting rid of road shows,
All of the fun stuff.
ward meals. Everything that was fun is now gone.
Yes. I do want to address something real quick because JC brings up a point that is a thing. JC references a recipe for abuse, femicide in India. That used to happen. Now, when it comes to horrible stories in arranged marriage, does it happen? Absolutely. I would encourage you be very careful when focusing on those stories because, like I've told other people, if I could show you that happening in the US right now. I could show you that happening in the United Kingdom right now. I can show you that in every single country in love marriages. Okay. So I always encourage people be very careful when focusing on that. It is a problem. It is being addressed and it definitely deserves to be talked about. But we can't just assume that all arranged marriages or marriages that take place in countries with black and brown people that are fundamentally different than American marriages are worse just because of extreme circumstances you see pop up in the news. The overwhelming majority of marriages, just even love marriages in America, are happy. They're healthy. They're full of good people. They're full of law-abiding citizens.
Well, I will say this one thing that was culturally different with either the Jesus myth or this thing that came into power called Jesus. The one thing he did bring into marriage that didn't exist was love, choice, witnesses, no incest, no polygamy. So I will argue against that. And I will say that if anything changed that benefited women, it was the invention of Jesus. Because prior to that, women had no choice. They were a piece of, like, something to be
Property.
bartered and sold.
Property.
Their value only meant their heritage, their father's money, their breeding, and then to be sold into polygamy. Like, I'm sorry, but I will say that the Christian idea of marriage is still better than any other version of marriage out there because it means we commit to each other. We say vows to each other. We commit to be like monogamous to each other. We only have each other, and we live and die with each other. And that didn't exist prior to Jesus. So
Are you
I
sure
won't.
about that?
That does exist. I mean, that is like there's so many like love stories.
Not with the other major religions.
With
I'm sorry,
Hinduism?
Muslims don't believe in that.
Well, no, yeah,
Muslims weren't around yet. It was just
Muslims weren't
Judaism.
around yet.
Just a minute. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Muslims weren't around. It was Judaism, or it was a Greco-Roman religion, or whatever was left of the Egyptians.
But they still bartered, and the whole thing of like arranged brides is like just like to become a piece of thing that you're going to be sold off to.
The thing is that there's
bread
multiple,
too.
There's multiple dynamics to that, because there's even like TV shows on how this is done. So
Dude, I don't want to have sex with a man that my dad brings up to my door, and then I'm forced to live with the next 20 years.
That's not even how it works.
Well, in my mind as a woman, that's how it works. In your mind as a man, that might not be how it works. But I'm going to say, as a woman, it looks like a guy I didn't have any interest in. My dad just selling me off, and then having to be stuck with him, and no way out, and his breeder.
So I would say there's actually a TV show called Indian Matchmaking. Watch it. The women have the choice. The women choose all the way down. Some of the women even cut the guys out. It's a thing, and it's becoming popular in America without the religious side.
Thank God for India giving women a choice. That's a first.
Yeah. So basically, my point is that I'm in agreement with you on one aspect, and that is that there are other faiths that like empower femininity much better than the LDS Church. I think we can agree on that, and that's the point.
I will agree with that.
Yeah, that's what that was trying to give an example.
I think like the thing is like women, because I am very conservative, but I am very much also women having a choice over their autonomy of themselves and choice. And it doesn't matter about if it's reproductive choice. It should matter about who they want to fall in love with, how many kids they want to have. That should never be forced on them, because like I've heard so many horror stories of women being sold into polygamy. Because, I know Brielle Decker, we interviewed her. She didn't have a choice becoming the 65th wife of Warren Jeffs, or these Kingston girls who get married and then have to have a baby every year with their cousin or their uncle. And that's gross. And that happens every day in Utah. That is every day in Utah. That still exists in Utah. So to say we're progressive or we have such advanced like laws or constitutional rights, it's bullshit in Utah, because it doesn't exist here, because women are like, you could probably get an abortion faster than you could fight the polygamy and the like incest in this state.
Yeah, it's wild. When I moved out here, I heard about that, and I'm just like, well, okay, I can understand now why some of my beliefs are kind of like triggering for some people, because at first I didn't know why. I'm like, there's TV shows on this, and there's this, and there's all this stuff out there. And then they're like, have you seen Warren Jeffs and all these people? And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it.
See, now that's what's interesting about it, the particular toxicity of Mormonism as opposed to like Christianity at large, which I think is what you ladies have been talking about. This is something I've been curious about to hear from the women on this, because I know, I don't know specifically that all of you are on second or third relationships or with other people, but I mean, it does seem like, do you identify with this? That their first relationship outside of the church is one where there's a lot more consent involved in every aspect of it. How much of that is the church, and how much of that is, well, the first marriage, you got married when you were 19 or 20 years old or something 17. Like that?
17 for me.
Oh yeah,
I will say, just as a person who was married to someone, when we first got married, he was not a member, and he joined the church but then was only active for a short amount of time. I will say the most telling thing to me about how harmful Mormonism is that there are so many women in my position who gaslight themselves and oppress themselves in these relationships. That to me is the most damning tell about Mormonism. It's not even that the men told us what to do and we did it. It's that we gaslit ourselves into doing it because that's what profited the system and that's what was acceptable. And
That's
so
what our
for me
grandmas told us to
personally,
do too.
that's what our grandmothers and our mothers and our aunts and our cousins, that's what they all told us was acceptable in Mormonism. And for me as a person who I'm bisexual, and because I chose to be with a man, I was acceptable. But if I chose to be with a woman, I was not. And because I was abused as a child, I was incapable of asserting to say no to sexual things and ended up in lots of sticky situations and shamed myself for that, blamed myself for that because of the culture. And then thought that I could make up for my sins in that area by having more children, because that meant I was more acceptable in Mormonism if I had more children. So
Overcompensated.
looking back on my life, there were so many decisions that I made that were based on the fact that I was not acceptable and I was trying so hard to be accepted that I did things that were detrimental to my own health, my own mental health, my own physical health, my own future, my own well-being, because I wanted so much to be accepted in Mormonism. And so I look at a lot of these women that we hear them on interviews, we hear them on podcasts, we hear them out there in social media who are saying, I choose this. This is what I want for my life. And it's not true. And they don't know it's not true because they've never experienced anything different and they've never been acceptable for who they actually are. They're only acceptable for what they do. And that is the harm of Mormonism. When I hear apologetics come to me and say, look at the fruits of Mormonism, I say, look at 30,000 women who are captive in polygamous cults right now. Look at the hugely growing homeless population of Salt Lake City, where you're literally across the street from the temple where they profess to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ and yet won't let you have a warming shelter. Those are the fruits of Mormonism. Women in bondage, women in slavery, women gaslighting themselves into doing things that are harmful to them because it makes them more acceptable in the culture.
Yeah, that's why I got
Nice.
married at 17.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
I
Honey,
yeah,
that was
I fell in
beautiful.
love with somebody and I didn't want to sin, you know? And so I got married instead of going to senior prom, and I was not even out of school.
I'm sorry,
And
Heidi.
so it's okay. You know, it didn't work. He was 25, almost 26 years old, and my parents signed because that was completely correct according to them. They got married at 14 and 16. So what are they going to say about it?
God.
And I wasn't even pregnant or doing anything naughty. Like, I mean, obviously I was trying not to do anything naughty. And so
Yeah.
like, I just wanted to be, like you said, I wanted to make sure that I would do the right thing. And this was like a guy I knew for 4 months. And, you know, it was just not smart. And it led to, you know, I have 2 beautiful daughters, so I can't take it back. But, it was a disaster. I mean,
Yeah.
he had really bad bipolar, and that's not the problem. He just wouldn't take his meds. He was taking meth instead. That's not a good cure. Don't do that. That doesn't
Your
work.
results may vary.
Yeah.
Other advice
Yeah.
is available. Don't
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, don't do that. And you
Right.
know, I still continued to be a little bit different than most Mormon women, which I'm so grateful for my family that was a little more progressive. They were like, still go to college. If I hadn't, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know where I would be. I still continued to go through, and I was a nurse by the time I was 22, but I was also a mom of 3 kids. by the time I was 22. So I have 6, you know.
That
So
is advanced. You're a badass. Oh my gosh.
I think I almost killed myself though doing it. Like my body's falling all apart now. Like I'm 48 and everything's just going away. But you know, it is what it
You
is.
know,
But like you do it because you want to survive and prove it wrong, you know.
Heidi, I'm just resonating so much with what you're saying because I think as Mormon women, we are expected to do so much. Our checklist is so long. And it feels like, and I'm so sorry, I don't want to ever be dismissive of the male experience because I know that you guys have had your own unique traumas in Mormonism.
You poor boys have to be
And
married to this hot mess. Okay. That's what we're all saying.
well,
Okay.
but also,
Okay.
I mean, there is so much cultural shame for the men as well. Like as far as checking boxes and doing things correctly and being righteous and going on missions and all. I like it's traumatic for men too. Like Mormonism is not good for anyone at all. But what Heidi, what you're saying is so powerful to me because I'm looking back over the course of my life and realizing how much I ran myself into the ground to make up for the things that the men in my life weren't doing, or trying to make myself acceptable. So, you know, I just was a hot mess of high achieving, you know, high functioning depression for so many years of my life.
Well,
And
because we're not taught to be even saved by grace. We have to be saved by works. So like,
yes,
and that goes
yes,
for everyone, not just women,
exactly.
especially men. You even have the pressure more so being successful and all these other things on top of it. But then we have somewhat success plus you got to have the perfect house, the perfect, like I resonated with what they were saying, like you got to be the perfect body and the perfect this and I talked to William Ramsey. And when I talked to him, he said, you know, the most thing I know of Mormons is their women are kind of like Stepford wives.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
said, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. You know, I mean, I see it.
100%.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm thinking about the most difficult times in my life were, you know, when I I had young children at home. I had, you know, sorry guys, I'm just going to get emotional and I never apologize for getting emotional because it's real life.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. Be who you
In
are.
thank you, appreciate you. In 2004, I had 4 young children at home. My oldest, I think, was 9, and my youngest was 3. And I was getting my master's degree because my husband had started a business that was failing and we were destitute. We were on food stamps, we were on Medicaid. And the only money that was being brought in was the side hustles that I could do. And I was teaching piano lessons, but I had to take 2 of my infant children with me because my husband would not watch them. I had to drag those kids with me to those piano lessons and force them to be quiet while I worked for 4 or 6 hours every afternoon, making $20 an hour teaching piano lessons because that was the only cash income that we had. And I remember dropping off my oldest daughter at school in the morning and saying, see you tomorrow, because I would drive an hour away to go to the university that I went to, getting my master's degree. I would go to class all day. I would teach in the afternoon and I would go to rehearsals at night for shows. And I did that 5 days a week for 2
Debbie,
years.
I muted you because we can hear the background noise.
And I think that throughout that entire time, I felt completely inadequate to what I was doing. I felt like I wasn't earning enough. I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't there for my kids enough. I wasn't Mormoning hard enough because I couldn't go to the temple. And because, you know, I had to turn down church callings because I was too busy getting my degree. And it's just wild to me to think that I gave birth to my 5th child in April, right before I graduated with my master's degree, and I had to leave my graduation ceremony early so that I could nurse my son. And yet at the same time, I felt completely inadequate and I felt like a failure.
I can really resonate with that because while I was doing the things I was doing, trying to provide, because I had a husband that liked to just come home and be like, surprise, I quit my job today. Because I'm having bipolar and everyone hates me there. And I'm like, please just take your medication. Stop taking meth. Like, what are we doing here? But like, this was real. This was my real life. Right. And so I just wanted to fix him, but I couldn't. And I wanted to fix everything else and I couldn't. And I wanted to do the things I needed to do on no sleep, working, full time, get off as a CNA at that time, sleep 2 hours in the parking lot, go to school all day, come home, see my kids for a minute, go back. This was on and on. And I get rewarded by now the guy that ran off and didn't take care of anything gets to see the daughter that hates me because I was never there.
So would you just
there you go.
So it sounds like I'm hearing a pattern, and I just want to clarify something. It sounds like the burden of providing is on the men until it's not and falls on the women, right? Like if the man can't provide, the women have to do it anyway, right? Is that what I'm getting from this?
I think I always was equal. I never was a stay-at-home mom, and I never worked less than full time, and I was the breadwinner. Yeah.
I'm just curious because I've heard a lot of, both just being in the church and a lot of women say like they feel like second-class citizens to men, and the men are the providers and men are the priesthood holders. They're the ones that are supposed to work. Women are supposed to stay at home. But then, husbands in school, husbands doesn't make enough, so they have to take on more anyway. Right. Is that, would you say that's the norm or what?
I think maybe for other people like mine, I was in a really weird dichotomy and I just felt like I was always that girl that pulled her bootstraps up and was like, let's just get this done. Like, who cares who has to do it, right? The guy, the girl, like I wasn't really of that mental thought process at all, but I always did it. But I always assumed he would meet me and it took 2 incomes even then, and like we would be equals, but that just never happened. And the more time I spent away from my kids, obviously resentments formed because I have one that has not spoken to me in 6 years. And she's 29 and has a baby, so.
I think one of the interesting things about the conundrum and ladies, I'm curious what you think about this, is that we talk a lot about the infantilization of men in the church at the same time as the empowerment and the patriarchal empowerment of men. But on the women's side, I feel like it's the same. It's like they empower women to be this. They put them up on a pedestal, on the one side. Oh, you are all heavenly mothers in training. You are all like Mary. You are all like Eve. You are all like boom, 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 boom. And then at the same time, turn around and backhanded infantilize them. And I know I've had conversations like this, but do you see that? Do you feel like women are infantilized as well in the church?
It's a great question. And I think there are elements of that for sure. And we see it every time a woman gets up and talks in general conference because she can't really have her own thoughts. When she gives a talk, she quotes the general authorities more than she quotes women, even when she's talking about women and women's issues. And she has a sort of lilt to her voice, and she has a very certain way of speaking, right? When women get up in general conference, young women, let me appeal to you.
Oh my God, you do it so well.
PTSD.
I gotta ask, what is that voice? I gotta ask, what is that voice? Because I only hear that during like conference talks.
Yeah,
and,
that's exactly what it is.
Like get up on stage, but like then they talk
It's
normal
the funky
outside. What
baby
is
voice.
that?
It's like the kind and gentle, like the soothing, but it's also somewhat hypnotic, but it's also this idea of like women are not allowed to be strong and powerful. I remember my dad being angry about the fact that Sherry Dew was so opinionated. And here she was, this single woman who had never been married. And there's got to be a reason for that. There's a reason she was never married. And the implication was that like, if you're an intelligent and assertive woman, you're never getting married. So you better shut up and talk softly And Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey was triggering for me because it was so many elements of Mormonism. The only difference is that, we're allowed to wear short sleeves and pants, and they're not. Like I can have my hair down instead of having it braided. But the way that they treat women and talk about women is almost exactly the same.
Well, that marriage that I was in, I was literally told by my family to stay because I was married for time and all eternity, and I best make that work. And I was like, this is insane. Like at some point, and I never really fit in anyways in church, so I kind of gave up on that part of it anyway, because I was the girl that would lay the tile with my husband. I was the girl that would be loud, and I'm not a meek and mild anything, and I always worked full time. And as a nurse, you don't get a pick if you're there on Sunday or not. Like, sorry, like they don't care. You're working.
This is why I like chatting with you and
yeah.
Debbie, because it's like we might disagree on some things, but please don't do that baby voice. Scream at me if you disagree. I'm fine with that. Don't do that baby voice. It annoys the hell out of me.
Now, and something that's interesting about that, how many times have you been in church and said, and his wife, Heidi, is a CNA who put herself through school and helps to provide for their family? No. What's the mention? Oh, so-and-so, and he and his wife have 7 children, brother so-and-so. And it's like...
Yeah.
That's why I love so much that the ex-Mormon community refers to David Bednar as Susan's wife. Or Susan's husband.
Susan.
Wait, the elders referred to as her wife?
No, sorry, I got that wrong. The ex-Mormons refer to David Bednar as Susan's husband.
No. Okay. I was like, hold on a second. I missed something big here. Spill the tea, please. Like,
but you know what's funny and this is probably going to stray into an area that I don't know. Maybe we want to not go into. But if I decided right now today that I was going to transition into a male gender, I still wouldn't be acceptable in Mormonism. Because if you're not, if that's not your original sex, then you still don't get to hold the priesthood. So there's just no way for women to actually to have any power in that system. It's always deferred to a man, no matter what. And I just remember teaching gospel doctrine, all the callings that I held, I had to report to a man, I had to check in with a man. And there was always just the underlying thing of having to go into a 2-step interview process to be declared worthy, to have someone else tell me that I'm worthy. And it used to be so confusing to me because the last question is always, do you consider yourself worthy to enter the house of the Lord? And I
wished I wouldn't have been. I wished I hadn't gone.
Well, me too. That was its own trauma. Yeah. That's a rabbit hole for another day. But I always found it so confusing because I was like, why are you even asking me that question? Because no matter what I answer, whether I answer yes or no, it doesn't matter as much as the person who's conducting the interview. And I remember very specifically my very last Temple Recommend interview. I don't know exactly what happened before or who spoke to this priesthood authority, but when I went in for my recommend interview with the stake president, he was like the first counselor in the stake presidency. And he asked me, do you keep the law of chastity? And I said, yes. And he said, thank you. Thank you. And then he went off on a tangent talking about how important it is to keep the law of chastity. And I was like, okay. Next question. Like, can we ask the next question? Like, I've got children to feed. Can I go home? And he said, do you know what the number one cause of apostasy is for people who are divorced? And I had just barely gotten divorced at this point. And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to guess probably, extramarital sex. And he was like, that's correct. That's correct. And he said, did you know that when we have a council where we convene and we talk with people who have sinned, do you know what we call those councils other than a disciplinary council? And I was like, I've got no idea, dude. What are you getting at here? He said, we call those council of love. And do you know what it's intended do you know what those counsels are intended for? And I said, I mean, to try and determine the person's worthiness again, kind of like we're doing right here. And he said, no, when we convene as a council of love, we want you to know how much we love and care about you. And we care about your eternal salvation. So there's no shame and there's no fear and there's no reason for you to be worried about going to such a council. If you sinned, you could confess and you would just be welcomed with open arms. And he sat and he was very quiet. And I said, okay, I understand what you're saying. Can we move on? Like, I was genuinely like very confused about I'd never had an interview go this way before. And the only thing that I can think is that someone who shall remain nameless may have put a seed into that gentleman's head that perhaps maybe I was not living the law of chastity and he was trying to get me to confess. It was very, very confusing to me. And it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you know, Mormons tell on each other, you know, for one thing. And also, you know, it's very possible that embittered spouses maybe say things to people that shouldn't be said. But the whole idea that no matter what I say in that interview, if somebody had come to him and told him beforehand that they thought I was doing something wrong, he gets to make his own determination, regardless of what I say, you know, and the fact that I could have been kept out of the temple wedding of my oldest daughter because of something that someone else said, because my opinion doesn't matter as a woman. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, the same is true of men too, right? You guys could go into a temple recommend interview. The same thing could have happened to you. But to me, it's even like the fact that I don't hold the priesthood. And so I don't have any standing and I don't have any say. It just always felt like no matter what I did, it was never going to be good enough.
I felt
That's
that way with the
heartbreaking.
women, to be honest.
That's
I felt
heartbreaking.
that way with the women. I never felt, I still don't. I still don't have very many girlfriends. I fit in with the guys and, you know, I would do the labor with the guys. I would do the things with the guys because my ex-husband was missing so much. I didn't really have a whole lot of choice in that matter, as far as not at church, but at getting things done or who I could relate to. Or as I became a registered nurse, like the people I was around, I worked in the ER. So like I never understood the women. And even though I can toll paint really well, I never was allowed to be very
High five on the toll paint.
Man, if you
No
were a toll
calling,
painter or a
yes.
quilter in Utah, you had
Oh.
it made.
Yes, I was good at that. No, I was a good toll painter, but I was not accepted because I worked on Sunday.
But how are those no bakes?
Oh, I know.
Oh, no bake
If you don't
cookies.
do no bakes, you don't make the no bakes.
The
Out of
best cookie
darkness.
ever.
That's
That's
just
damn straight.
Just listening to all this is wild to me because, like, I never got the third degree like that, even for my what is it called? The interview to be sustained for the Melchizedek priesthood. I didn't get that. It's like, do you follow the law of chastity? Yeah.
Dave, you
Okay.
need to like get married in the temple and like go through the process.
I'm not eligible for marriage in Mormonism or in Hinduism, so I'm good there. But I'll joke.
You lucky sucker. We're all jelly.
Less
No.
drama for you.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
it's a
we're all
nightmare.
like,
trust me.
let's all be more like Dave.
Well, no, all joking aside, it's just like, okay, do you follow the law of chastity? Yeah. Okay, I see here when you were baptized, you said you have kids. Do you pay child support? Yeah. Okay, let's move on. And I'm like, okay, like it was literally rapid fire, done in like what, 2 minutes?
Not
Something
even a
like
little
that.
factory question. That's so shocking to me.
No, just went straight through, fired it through, and I don't know if it's like what it's
He's
called.
a convert. They're still using kid gloves on him. He's not like an old timey generational Mormon where they like are like putting the fork in you and saying, did he use 2 fingers or 1?
Yeah, exactly. My ex-husband didn't even get in very much trouble. And I do think it was because he was a convert, when he cheated on me straight out. Like, and I was fully expecting him to like get in deep trouble, you know, like go to a something or I don't know, but he didn't. And they just like let it slide. But when I couldn't get a divorce for 2 years because he was on the run from everyone, including definitely child support people, and I couldn't get my divorce served, I was held accountable and had to go before a disciplinary council because apparently we're still married, even though I can't divorce this guy. And I'm like, listen, this is insanity. I am not married to I've had the papers for 2 years. I don't know what to do. Like
I didn't even
Yeah.
understand some of the questions, like why he was asking it, because they know my background. And like I think the questions could be overhauled like a lot. Like one of the big ones, it was more like around the temple and do you pay tithing and all this stuff. But nobody from my time of investigation to baptism or, you know, up until now, nobody asked me important questions like, do you believe Jesus is the Son of God?
Oh, geez.
The answer is no. I come from a Hindu background. I believe he's a sadhu. He's a holy man. Had I known this, I wouldn't have joined.
Oh,
So, Dave, you haven't even gone through the temple yet. You got lucky, right? You're
I mean,
not in doubt?
Correct. I'm not in doubt. I've seen
Okay.
the temple. It didn't
Yeah,
bother me
you're lucky.
personally,
Okay.
but it didn't bother me personally looking at it. But yeah. So
Have
it's
they
like
ever pressured you to go through the temple? I'm curious. Like,
some
Dave,
people,
do you want
well,
to take
not
out your
pressure.
endowment?
Well, some people asked, some people encouraged, but I personally never felt pressured. And I think that's kind of, maybe it's a me thing, because I'm sure you guys kind of know my personality by now. I'm a type A person that thrives on conflict. So they might have wanted to avoid contentiousness.
Maybe we shouldn't let Dave go through the temple. What is he going to say afterward?
I mean,
Just
in the middle.
honestly,
You
I-
can go through the temple once, lie your way through. Just do it. Just so you can tell us, like,
I
what you
don't
think
have a
about the
problem with that.
movie.
Return a report.
I don't even have a problem with it, honestly. I don't see it like it looks like another religious ritual to me. That's fine. But like the whole questions around like worthiness, I think, in my opinion, and I'm gonna get flack for this from Ward Radio, but I think a lot of questions should be based more on who do you say Christ is, and what, like, you know, President Nelson is a prophet. What do you like when you hear the word prophet? What does that mean to you? What does it mean to be a prophet? Had I been asked that, I wouldn't have said he speaks to God and then relays it to us. I would have said he's just a guru. You listen to him until it doesn't apply.
None
Exactly.
of this
He's
has
a
to do
teacher.
with theology. None of this.
So I'm going
has
to point
do
to dude
Exactly.
271 DBs.
all of
Exactly.
this has to
Down
do
here.
with power.
It
Well,
says
yeah,
not
and I'm
using
learning.
men-
I'm learning that now, X Mojo, and this is why I like talking to you. I'm learning that now, and excuse me for trying to have some standards here, but you know,
So I just want to point out that the dude comment that it's down at the bottom of the screen. Only Jesus Christ himself could fulfill all the eternal laws and rules to get into the Mormon celestial kingdom. But I'll note that Jesus could not attend BYU and
He didn't
he would not be able to be a temple worker, as far as I
Every
know.
every
And the
student
statue
that
in
goes
most of the
to
visitor
BYU
centers
is
show his
Jesus.
born shoulder. Those are the
That's actually
three
funny.
comments I'll do
But-
on that.
I mean, I've told
Does
this
he
story.
even know the secret handshakes? I don't think he even knows the secret handshakes.
How does he even do the secret handshakes? I mean, he's
Uh-oh.
We're all going to hell, guys. We're all
Guys,
going
Please
to hell.
refer to your
guys.
Freemason manual, and you will know your
there already.
handshakes.
I was just gonna say, guys, it's okay. Jesus can Google it. It's out there. It's,
It's
Chat
like,
GPT 's
Mike
thing.
Norton. Jesus is like, I'm glad this Mike Norton guy made these videos. No, but you know, I told the story. I told Gene the story, and he knows I tell long-winded stories, so I won't go into the details. But you know,
That's right.
My
Thanks everyone
wife-
for watching. Like and
Okay, great.
subscribe. Oh no, go ahead. Go
we're
ahead.
done here. Wrap it up. No, I'm just
But
kidding.
you know, just related to this worthiness thing, though, you know, my wife went through the temple. The week that I was excommunicated, didn't realize this was the week. Started with my wife went after going through the temple, committed a sin. You know, had gone to her bishop to confess a sexual sin, and he took her temple recommend away. Gave her this big old rash of, I can't believe that you would do this, after having finally gone through the temple. And my wife was just going through the temple because she wanted to have a spiritual experience with God because we'd endured a miscarriage. And she was trying to rediscover what was lost in this miscarriage and do the emotional work. But then at the same time, my wife has always liked girls, and she had an opportunity to be with a woman. And she took it. This is part of her spirituality. And he took away her temple recommend. And I said to her, because I've learned how to play priesthood roulette better since leaving the church. I said, here's what you do. You go to him and you tell him, my husband likes it when I do it. I do it to keep my family together. And she's like, that won't work. I said, what have you got to lose? She went in, told it to him. He reached into his desk, pulled her temple recommend out, and put it right back on the table. And
did he ask one finger or two or not? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't there for that part.
You did it
I'm
first.
sure he was wondering though. But then he said, I want to see your husband. He's got to come in and tell me to my face. Didn't expect I would. I did go in and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. And then and the look of shock on his face when I showed up.
Looks like my face right now.
You said it first. I said it
and
louder.
then goes
She
up,
didn't say the same.
he goes into the next room. It's like, excuse me a minute. He goes to the next room, brings in the first and second counselor and the ward freaking clerk to sit down and say, go ahead. Tell
The
us.
details.
So is that, I want to know now, is that in your permanent record, in your membership record
I'm
now?
Sure.
Right.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's been
It
notated.
should be. It's the best story ever told. Hello.
I don't know if you can say if it's technically true that
They
I have a
stapled
record
it.
anymore,
They
because
stapled
I
it
got
on.
that. Stapled it to my excommunication letter.
Yeah, they
I was
kept it.
excommunicated. I was excommunicated 7 days later. So
Yeah, they
after I-
definitely wrote it. Yeah, I know.
after looking these four men in the eyes and saying, "My name is Joe Rollins, and I'm a pervert. I like watching my wife with women."
Did you tell him you were going for
It's
help? Did you say,
Huh?
I'm going to seek help for this, buddy?
No.
I'm in a 12-step program.
If I'd have done that,
We're
you
gonna
know me,
answer
I'm
to
a snark.
Joseph.
I'm a snarky guy. If I was going to say something like that, I'm going to say, we got the help. That was the help.
Oh,
I just kind of had another mini revelation, if I may, real
Uh-oh.
quick, if nobody
Dave,
minds.
please tell. Please tell.
So, you guys probably know I'm a bit more traditional, right? I personally will never see a female doctor, only male doctors. At my ward, I would never shake a woman's hand. Just, that's just how I am. So the fact that a male bishop can be alone in a room with a woman or a child asking these kinds of questions. How do I say this without you getting demonetized? It strikes me as improper.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
It's odd
It's
to me.
very
And
proper way of
odd.
saying improper. Yes.
Yeah, I don't, not bashing anybody here. To me, from my background and the way I see things, it just does not. Why?
Somebody
What is the
says
function?
not anymore. Did they change it? You
They
guys
did
Do you
change
know?
it. They did.
Okay.
Well, they have now
it changed?
they've allowed parents to be in the room when their children are being interviewed, if their children are minors.
Well, not helpful.
But
Then
not,
everybody's perfect. Yeah.
not all
I don't
parents.
know why
take
bishops
advantage of
need
that.
to interview other people's children when they're minors, because that's the parents' business. If your kid's messing up, I'm going to be like, if my sons mess up, I'm going to be the one who knows and be like, hey, boys, I'm not going to call them to repentance. I'm going to make them time out and clean the room. There's a difference. Like, I don't know what these people think.
It comes back down to power and control. If you don't have a bishop interviewing every single person who's going to go into the temple, then it's anything goes. If you leave it up to the parents to say to the bishop whether or not their child is worthy to go on the temple trip and do baptisms, then you're going to have, again, bishop roulette is bad enough, but can you imagine parent roulette and bringing that into it? And how many parents would give their kids a pass where a bishop would put their foot down and say that's not acceptable? And
But they're doing this from the age
But
of
they're not
8, and it's
mandatory
not till
reporting.
just a
So
minute.
there's also a scapeguard in like, okay, I get that. Like if parents aren't doing the business of like protecting their kids, like then that next level should be mandatory reporting, like a teacher or a counselor or a bishop who has another voice with the child. That's the weird thing is
100%.
I don't understand why they don't like fight against.
We're in Tim's living room and he wants to say something.
Yeah.
Oh yes,
They're-
Tim. It's Tim time, and he hasn't said 10 words. Come on, Tim, bring it out.
They do it from the age of 8, and it's not till 11 or 12 that they go to the temple. So
Yep.
why are they doing it from the age of 8 to 11 or 12?
there's no
To give
reason
you a
for
guilt
it. I totally
complex
agree with
for
you.
the rest
but
of your
yes,
life.
yeah,
And-
because go ahead.
And where's the canonized revelation saying that God even wants a temple interview worthiness recommend system? Some of the most important things in Mormonism, the endowment, the words for the sealing ceremony, we have no revelation for this stuff.
Mhm.
Exactly. It's an arbitrary policy. And
Well,
I don't know how
it
many
was
of you
created
looked at
by-
the
Puppet roulette.
It was created pretty much by Joseph Smith to get into the anointed quorum, and then to get your endowment was Brigham Young. They
Right.
did have
It was
kind of a recommend to go to the Nauvoo temple.
It was created
Really
6
wouldn't.
weeks after he received his Masonic endowments, just FYI.
So are there different questions for kids, or is it the same, or how does that work?
It's pretty much the same for kids. And that, again, is where we get into problematic areas because some bishops are going to take their leeway. And I had some bishops who were really great and who stuck just to the questions, and my interview was over in 3 to 4 minutes. And then I had other bishops who pried and who wanted to know details. And specifically, when I went in to do my confession after I was pregnant out of wedlock, my bishop wanted to know the extent of my sin and questioned me about it. And I felt like he was justified in doing so because I prepared myself for that interview by reading The Miracle of Forgiveness, which made me feel like a piece of human garbage. And so, I believed up until the time that I was probably around 35 years old that the assault that happened to me when I was 17 was my fault because I put myself in a bad position.
It
Well,
just seems
you know
odd
what?
to
I
me.
didn't know what the word masturbation meant, so I always said no. And then until I figured it out, and I was like, "Oh shit, I was probably guilty."
What is it?
No,
I've never heard that before. Debbie.
Really,
Tell us.
like when you're having an adult ask you questions and you don't have the vernacular, and you're just a human, like literally. And I just remember kind of having that mind blowing, like mental thing, like going, "No, no."
Well, because the young women did not get a little factory talk like the young men did. And
Yes, we did not have a little factory.
It's just assumed that women don't have a factory. And that's not an issue. And so
That
they
women
don't
don't
talk
talk
to us
about
about
those
it or
things.
teach us about it at all.
I feel like if you setting aside the chastity thing for just a moment, because that's ridiculous. If you have to ask an 8-year-old, have you ever been convicted of a crime? I feel like we may need to be having a separate discussion than whether or not you can get baptized.
I always say, well, not convicted.
I mean, yeah, but I think now it's changed to have you ever committed a crime? Like,
When you
if
consider that,
bishops are asking 8-year-olds that, I would question some
I
things
don't think
about
they're
that.
asking 8-year-olds that. I think it's
I
just
would
a
have done
standard
much
temple
better
recommend
had I
question.
lived in a different time when God's standard for temple worthiness was different and included questions like, do you wash your garments regularly? Do you allow your cattle to graze on property that's not your property? I would have done much better.
I would too, yeah. I never let my cattle graze anywhere they're not supposed to.
Clevin Bundy, not so much. But it's an interesting conundrum. It's an interesting thing with the differences with men, but like, because like you say, the little factory talk, I feel like that is part of the infantilizing. Is that
Yes.
I got the little factory talk was a talk, but it also was a pamphlet called "To Young Men Only," and if you got sent home with that pamphlet from the bishop's office, It meant that you were little Joey Rollins, 14 years old, and you had gone to see Cleon Skousen speak in Salt Lake City. Gene knows the story, and that he showed you the last interview between James C. Dobson of Focus on the Family fame and Ted Bundy the night before Ted Bundy was executed, and you knew that you were the next Ted Bundy, and oh my God, if anybody figures it out, and bawled your eyes out in the bishop's office about, I don't want to be Ted Bundy, but I do like the brown penny section of the Mervyn's catalog, and I get to it before my mom gets to it on the Sunday mornings. And then and just the way this old farmer, this Cliven Bundy type guy, looked at me and he's like, wait a minute, you do what? And then I'm like, well, he's like, I don't know anybody who does that. I am the judge in Israel in this ward. And I can tell you there is no one in this congregation with a problem like that. And he's like, I am surprised at you. And then he reaches into his desk and he's got a stack of To Young Men Only pamphlets this thick. And I'm like, look,
because he just had to
no one else
reorder.
No one else. Yeah, right. I'm like, is there a To Young Women Only?
There's not. And
What was in the packet? What did it say? Like, I've never heard of this.
It's Boyd K. Packer's Little Factory Talk, including the thing people don't know. You know about the Little Factory Talk part where he talks about you don't pull your own relief valve on the factory. You go to sleep and let God pull the relief valve on your little factory for you.
What?
The little exchange here, little something, little.
And every time I took a shower and was cleaning myself, I was thinking about the Little Factory Talk.
Oh no,
That's in there. Yeah. And then
a scene from Ghostbusters comes to mind.
And I just wondered how much cleaning my factory could take before I crossed the line.
Everyone knows it's 3 shakes, Gene. I'm just letting you in on it now. Everyone knows it's 3.
The hell is going on in this church? My God.
Oh yeah.
My shampoo bottle said to wash and rinse and then repeat, but it doesn't say to stop repeating ever.
It did say repeat, Gene. Good Lord. That's not what the shampoo, that's not where the shampoo goes, Gene. All right.
By the way, for those of you who don't know, if you never read The Miracle of Forgiveness, then you know that if you're servicing your little factory, that you're eventually going to turn gay.
And then you're only in the service of your
that's
God.
That's part of the Little Factory Talk. The culmination of the Little Factory Talk is Boyd K. Packer explaining that he had to he was asked to reprimand a missionary while he was ministering to a mission, and the missionary had told him, he's like, I hit my companion, and he's like, oh, is that all? He's like, well, you don't know. And then the missionary basically told him that his companion had made a pass at him, and so he punched him. And so and President Packard says, well, son, you did nothing wrong. You did the right thing, and I'm freaking glad you did. Somebody had to do it, and it would have been inappropriate for an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ to have been the one. Basically saying he would have punched that missionary.
And that's the talk that got erased from priesthood session.
Mm-hmm. But it's still out there, and it's still available. Talk. And it's
basically, you boys had it rough. I'm just gonna say it too. Mm-hmm. We were not only oppressed; there was equal. I'm now. I did not get the Little Factory pamphlet. Okay, but that sounds like traumatizing.
I don't know.
I don't think that we were more traumatized than the girls were. I really don't. And but it's like, it was this thing that I've discovered more and talked to people about it, is that this infantilization cuts all ways, including, the misanthropy among women in the church. Oh, I wouldn't want the priesthood. That's so much responsibility. Okay. Misogyny, but turn it around. Oh, well, that there had to be polygamy. I don't know if you guys have heard this. There has to be polygamy because the Lord knows that Satan's after the priesthood holders. And that in the last days, there's fewer of them that are going to make it to the celestial kingdom because,
once you get married and you're married polygamously, your little factory can just keep on producing.
Yeah. Much as it wants. Yes. Make sure. 3 wives. Can't go to heaven.
Celestial Viagra. But it's infantilization doesn't just hurt one gender; it hurts everybody.
Yes.
And
I
I
think
feel
that-
like Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like the women have had it worse. And I think, yeah, I'm kind of privileged being a convert because being an adult coming in a few years ago when a lot of changes have been made anyway, I didn't really see it. And I'm finding out about like all of this now, you know what I mean? Where it's like, just coming in, it's like, yeah, people are a little weird, but I mean, everyone seems okay. And then, listening to just women tell horrific stories of abuse and whatever. And it's like, it's very lopsided in my anecdotal observation. I could be wrong, but it seems to be very, very lopsided.
Imagine a culture here in Utah, but even earlier, where everyone is practically converts, like you are. Nobody really is hearing all of anything that's going on, and if you were to speak up about it, you could find yourself not just out of the church. You could find that your crops don't get water on the next rotation.
Well,
you could find that you could
back then
could
you'd
find,
be to society because you're not married. So that was a quote.
that too.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think that is my favorite comment of the evening, Exmo Joe, that systems that harm women harm men too, and
Mhm.
systems that harm men harm women too. And if you look at all of the polygamist spin-offs, there are so many men in those systems who will never get wives because they're all taken by the men who are higher in the hierarchy in the dominance than they are. They call these young men the lost boys, the ones who will never get to get married. They're ostracized from their society. And a system in which you can get women to oppress themselves is the ultimate repression. And that's exactly what we have in Mormonism. And it's not good for women and it's not good for men. It's a situation in a culture where people are not allowed to be human beings. They are not allowed to fully embrace all of the dark and light sides of themselves. They have to compartmentalize and shame themselves in order to fit into that system. And that's not good for anyone. All of us need the autonomy, the freedom, and the ability to fully express our humanity in all of its forms, and to not have to shame the parts of ourselves that don't fit into a religious system that was built by someone who was unhealthy and repressed and was a predator. And I just think it's wild. I don't think Joseph Smith ever envisioned that this church would grow to this size or that it would be as prominent or as successful financially as it is today. I think he probably would be shocked about it because all he wanted was money, power, and sex for himself. I don't think he was thinking one generation beyond that. I don't think he was thinking anywhere near into the future. All he wanted was what he wanted, and he got it. He got killed for it. But look at how it's perpetuated. And look at the thing that blows my mind is that the reason why it got perpetuated, I think, is because he was killed. If he hadn't been killed, we wouldn't have this historical persecution complex that kept us doubling down and buying back in and literally leaving the country and losing our lives across the plains to search for a religious freedom that really was never, it was an illusion to begin with. There was nothing being taken away from us in the first place, and there was nothing being given to us when we got to Utah in the second place. And it's just this ridiculous perpetuation of a cycle that never should have started in the first place. And what I love is connecting with all of you beautiful human beings who have broken that cycle and who said, this shit ends with me. No more.
Yeah,
That is beautiful. Like
that was beautiful. That was beautiful. There's.
I know. I'm like, yes,
There's a
my
saying
favorite
around
comment
that.
of the evening.
There's a saying
I
around
wish
that.
I knew how to do shorts.
That right
Just
there should be a
flip it. We
short.
can-
That
I-
is like
I
the
can-
most
I can help
powerful
you with
thing
that.
I've
I
ever
can help you.
heard ever.
Yeah, we'll have a workshop. We'll have a podcast
help
or
you.
workshops soon.
I'll help you make the short. But there's a saying that goes exactly with what Megan said, and trying to remember it. But basically, it's The silence of a martyr screams louder than the cries of a zealot.
There you go.
And
Amen.
I'm kind of leaning towards that because I'm still learning a lot. I'm still taking it all in, and I appreciate you guys letting me come here and learn.
Can I tell you the gospel of a great martyr by the name of Korihor, the martyr of reason? My exemplar.
Shameless
Korihor.
YouTube plug coming now.
That's right. Speaking of shameless YouTube,
but yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward that too, because that's something I've been thinking of myself, and not just with Joseph Smith, but people in general. It's like, how many like dictators, Hitler or whoever, right? Had they just been, I don't know, allowed to be fizzled out or rot away in prison somewhere, just people, not even just Joseph Smith, how many like world movements and like cults and other things would have collapsed? Exactly. Because of that.
That somebody could do a book on that. That would be interesting. Find out little movements that got snuffed out.
Well,
So
and
anyway,
why humans want to just literally dominate other humans and kill them? Because, like, if you want to look through history, our genetic DNA says we literally are the meanest to each other, first and foremost, before we would kill another animal. In fact, like, some people are like mad if you kick a puppy, but you can beat your wife and no one's caring about it.
Although I'd like to push back, and I would like to say staying alive is genetically positive for passing your genes on.
Who's kicking
The
puppies?
song by the Bee Gees
Nobody.
or the
Nobody
actual
heard that.
staying alive?
No, I'm just saying that
Puppies.
there are examples of people that do that, right? And we have lots of genes that are in us that have been passed down through the lines, and some of them get turned off and some of them, but you know, what is genetically positive has been community and sticking together and sticking up for everyone. That's the long-term thing. And then we started, you know, planting wheat kernels and in Egypt and whatever, and it created a whole system of society. And so we're working through our societal problems still today. And you know, normally we go like 90 minutes for this show, and then we say goodbye. And then after the show, we talk for another 90 minutes a lot of times. And so we've gone a little bit long now for the show. I don't know if it's good or bad or otherwise, but we could say goodbye to everybody in a little bit.
Well, Megan ended it so perfectly with her
she did it
statements.
perfectly.
I think really like
It was
beautiful
really good.
way of explaining it here at the
And
end.
that was really good. And so I'll just say that I'm going to be interviewing Heidi soon. I've already interviewed Megan. I've already interviewed Meet Debbie Donovan. Someday, Diamond Dave will be interviewed, I predict. Who else have I interviewed?
You've interviewed
Me.
Joe. You've interviewed everyone on this panel besides Diamond
and
Heidi.
and
Heidi.
Heidi. Oh yes, Heidi.
Gotta
Sorry,
get
Heidi.
that. Gotta get on that. Gotta get on that.
Yeah, so we're gonna get on that. So check out Ladder Daily Digest, since this is multiple channels we're streaming, and look.
Hey,
for
we're
those interviews.
creating a community of people who are just interested in being interesting, and
That's
that's why I think Gene like celebrates content creators and also individuals and wants to put together panels and hear their voices, hear their stories, and it's absolutely amazing.
So thank you, and so thanks everybody for participating. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year. Get your Christmas shopping done, unless you're like me and either A, you don't believe in it for monetary reasons, or you have somebody that does it all for you, or you just want to do your own thing. And so anyway, have a good
Thank you,
rest
Gene.
of the week. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.
I like hellfire.
So.